Hey everyone, Pugs here with two new reviews for y'all. Today I'm covering Roller Cowards and Bucket Sweet Bucket, two episodes that don't really have anything in common worth mentioning in this intro. They both have SpongeBob and Patrick? Yeah, that's pretty weak, I'll admit. But I'm not sure how else I want to begin this video, so I guess I'll just leave it with that awkward note and move on to the part where I say thank you to everyone watching today. Like always, you're also very appreciated. And now, let's just get right into it. Starting off today's review is going to be Roller Cowards. So, a fun little fact about me that you probably don't already know, unless you know me in real life, I'm a huge roller coaster fan. Like, I love roller coasters. A lot. A lot, a lot. Like, I'm the type to beg and plead to sit in the front. I'm the type to ride roller coasters all day. I love them. I'd gush more, but then I'd be getting into my favorite roller coasters, which would then reveal my location if anyone was interested in cyberstalking me, so I think I'll refrain from doing that. But just know I love them. And so this episode feels like it was written specifically for me. Seriously, every time I saw that fiery fisto pane, you bet your ass I wanted to ride it. Like, give it to me now. To use some coaster lingo, of which I know a little bit, I'm not a coaster enthusiast, this coaster looks like a Strata mixed with a Giga, which sounds super fun. Now let me get into the actual episode. I love the calm way Roller Cowards begins with SpongeBob reading to Gary, which is then completely derailed by Patrick bursting through the wall, which gets this plot off to a running start. And once SpongeBob and Patrick head to bed, I love the way that Patrick's TV cord carries him back to his house, makes for a very dynamic exit from the scene. The dream SpongeBob has about Glove World is pretty entertaining. I love how SpongeBob and Patrick just fall into their graves. This probably counts as a tangent, but it'll be short so I won't put the sticker up. But like, the whole plot of this episode reminds me of that theoretical coaster that was made specifically to kill a person from the force of it. Pretty sure it's called the Euthanasia Coaster for obvious reasons. I'll have links of a video about it and a Wikipedia page about it in the description if you're curious. I think that this episode really captures the feeling of being, like, really scared about riding a roller coaster pretty well. And I'm sorry, but I have to get into another tangent, because see, I know this from experience. I love all roller coasters now, but for years I would refuse to ride any coasters that went upside down. I was so afraid of them. And I will say that if the line to a ride was as long as the one for the fiery fisto pane, and I didn't have a fast pass, which I usually don't because I'm cheap, then you bet your ass I'm not getting in that line. I'm so damn impatient, which is one of the reasons why I prefer to have a friend with me when I'm at an amusement park, because if I don't, I'll lose my mind with boredom while waiting in line. Okay, that's the last tangent, I swear. I love how SpongeBob and Patrick throughout this whole episode keep trying to seem cool for the other, but they both know that neither of them want to ride this ride. And then the whole scene of Glovey is actually hilarious, especially because I've, 1, played the Cosmic Shake, and 2, watched many playthroughs of Around the Clock at Bikini Bottom. Patrick, your fear is justified, trust me. SpongeBob and Patrick riding the mitten is a similarly hilarious scene, and it was a great display of their childish characteristics. I love how even the baby was tired of their bullshit. This episode really is just a hit when it comes to the comedy. We then get a surprise appearance of Larry, who, now that I'm thinking about it, we hadn't seen him in a while, not since That's the Lady. And, fun fact, this is his only appearance of season 5, so let's enjoy it while we can. Larry is very underrated in terms of comedy, I think, because he's usually pretty funny and nobody talks about it. Speaking of funny, the part where SpongeBob beats himself up with an ice cream cone is unexpectedly hilarious, because I was really thinking I was going to cringe, and here I am laughing. Patrick's own version of talking to himself in the mirror is similarly great. I love how he just punches himself. Finally, with just minutes before the park closes, SpongeBob and Patrick ride the fiery fisto pane. I will say the part right before they get on, where they're just standing there kind of psyching themselves up, yeah, that was a bit of a drag, but it was necessary for the pacing of the episode, so I can forgive it. It's just that it was kind of boring and completely uneventful, so I think it should have been reworked or maybe shortened. And then after all this tension and build-up, the roller coaster breaks. And this leads us to a touching moment where SpongeBob and Patrick confess to each other that they didn't want to ride the ride after all. And yay, because they don't have to face their fears. Except they do have to face their fears, because it turns out the ride is actually fine, and so now the duo are about to have the time of their lives. Or maybe not, considering their screams of terror. The actual scene of them riding the coaster is great, with perfect timing and fun visuals all over the place. I really liked the part where they switched skeletons. That was a good visual gag. Also, this scene makes me really want to ride that coaster, or at least a coaster with that layout. I don't know about the fist trying to pound me into dust. Anyway, SpongeBob and Patrick's excitement over having finally ridden the coaster and conquered their fears was so cute, and so satisfying after everything we'd seen so far in the episode. And with the addition of the conclusion of the spine joke that's been running for the whole episode, this episode ending is simply great. No complaints here. I don't think there's really much for me to say about roller cowards beyond what I've already said. I really enjoy this episode, and I'm the first to admit that I'm sure that one of the reasons I enjoy it so much is because I love roller coasters. But that's clearly not the only reason I love this episode. This episode is funny, enjoyable, and has a good story behind it with SpongeBob and Patrick working to face their fears. So clearly this is an episode that belongs in my amazing tier, where it comes in with a score of 9.2 out of 10. Up next in my foray into season 5 is Bucket Sweet Bucket. This episode isn't talked about very much, at least not from what I've seen, but it's funny because I remember this episode so clearly. I'm not even sure why, but this episode is very nearly nostalgic for me. Also, I'm like pretty sure I learned the word pizzazz from this episode. Does that mean I'm a SpongeBob SquarePants success story? So, with Bucket Sweet Bucket, here we've got a properly plankton-focused episode. Had we even had one of those, yet up to this point? And by that, I mean an episode that starts and ends with Plankton, that's all about him and what he's up to. I suppose Friend or Foe could count, though that's a jointly focused episode. And then even more importantly, is this the first time that we've watched Plankton in a non-strictly villain capacity? At the beginning of this episode, he's not really villainous. That doesn't happen, until a few minutes in. Well, I guess Spy Buddies also had this too, as it had the same combination of Plankton minding his business and then getting villainous, although it turns out that was Mr. Krabs in the end, so in a way Plankton wasn't villainous at all in that episode since the two had a bet. Okay, well, anyway, because this episode is at least somewhat novel, I'm intrigued, and Plankton himself is really enjoyable here. He's on that master manipulator shit when he convinces SpongeBob and Patrick to help. Speaking of that scene, I have many questions about the watermelon gag with Patrick. I didn't find it to be very funny, but it wasn't something I disliked either. I'm perfectly neutral about it. It's just, it was the kind of random comedy I typically enjoy, so I do wonder why it didn't quite work on me. Suddenly, Squidward enters the episode, and I love how he does so with no warning. He ends up being more of a minor supporting character, but I think his presence adds quite a bit to the episode, making this episode feel more complete than it would have if it had just been Plankton, SpongeBob, and Patrick. And I like that as Squidward is introduced, he's listening to the Kelpie G music from The Thing. That was a nice touch. And of course Squidward is a power walker. It all makes sense now. I'm telling you that in his heart, Squidward is a white woman. I'm joking. Anyway, let me move on from that. Squidward's offense upon seeing SpongeBob and Patrick's painting skills is pretty funny, and I love how Squidward can't pass up an opportunity to show his superiority, which gets him involved in painting the chum bucket without Plankton even having to do anything, to the teeny man's jubilation. Squidward's pretentiousness and ego do all the work for Plankton. Man, I love when characters are in character. I feel like that's the easiest way to describe why I like this moment. I love how Squidward basically ends up painting the chum bucket to look like the inside of his house with all his self-portraits. Goes to show yet again that Squidward does indeed have artistic talent, it's just his subject matter is shit. Plankton obviously is not a fan of this, and so I love how to fix it. He repainted the exterior to look like a picture of a log cabin. Like, damn, Plankton, you've been hiding this artistic skill this whole time? And I always love a good everyone's a critic gag. SpongeBob's enthusiasm to help Plankton is pretty fun to watch as well. I love how he ends up foiling Plankton's plans to steal a formula by enthusiastically taking pipes from the Krusty Krab to help repair the chum bucket. And then moving on to later in the episode, the bit with the windows is legit so hilarious. Patrick's part of it reminds me a lot of the Weast moment in Arg, strangely enough. The way Plankton completely loses it is great. I always love a good rage moment. The next part of Bucket Sweet Bucket with Plankton on a quest to steal the formula while SpongeBob and Patrick are basically stealing the Krusty Krab is pretty entertaining. The intermittent hup 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 sounds from SpongeBob and Patrick were good. I don't know, the noises just appealed to me. And also the sound design in this part is really in the same way as the beginning part in Spy Buddies. Something about footstep sounds with quiet music is just satisfying. Finally, once Plankton reaches the formula, I love his reaction to finally getting to it, because that's the kind of dramatics that I love to see. Even better is when Plankton discovers that this isn't the formula at all. It's Mr. Krabs' to-do list. I love how before we get the true blatant reveal, this to-do list answers the lingering question of where Mr. Krabs has been the entire episode, and that question was a very nicely built background question, giving the episode a bit of intrigue and mystery. I love how Plankton gets a second rage moment, breaking out the safe with his newly acquired muscles to find that the Krusty Krab is gone. Or, not really, because now the Krusty Krab is, the chum bucket. And then we get the return of Mr. Krabs, whose, as I said before, absence was very loud during the course of Bucket Sweet Bucket. The exposition visual gag was really clever and funny. I loved that. I love how Mr. Krabs just pushes the Krusty Krab back to its proper location. And then the confrontation between Mr. Krabs and Plankton is great. I love how Plankton is just completely over and throws himself out, literally. And the ending of this episode is great as well. I love how Squidward gets his win by designing the Krusty Krab according to his standards, using part of the chum bucket, and Mr. Krabs gets a win too by upcharging the high heaven because of the new decor. Great ending. I quite like Bucket Sweet Bucket. Like I was talking about earlier, I think this episode is pretty underrated and even forgotten, being one of the many episodes released during this time in the show's history to meet this fate. And that's a shame. Other than a few dull moments and a couple of unfunny gags here and there, this episode is really good. I'd say all this makes this one a worthy contender for my great tier, where it comes in with a score of 8.9 out of 10. As always, I'll be ending this review with some closing thoughts of mine. What a solid pair of great episodes. I always love when I get to review two great episodes back to back. Reviewing Roller Cowards had me thinking of the inherent subjectivity of reviews again. Obviously, reviews are subjective because they consist of giving your opinion on something, but I'm also kind of thinking of something that I've kind of been talking about, or talking around, every time I bring this up without actually saying it, and that's how our opinions are so often influenced by things that aren't quite related to things we're developing an opinion on. Like with Roller Cowards, one of the reasons I like the episode is because I like roller coasters. Does that mean if this episode had been about, I don't know, a zip line, I wouldn't have been so predisposed to give all the things I like about this episode some extra love? Because I think that's how my opinions of episodes are generally affected by outside influences. It's more enhancing what's already there. So I already liked Roller Cowards, but I love it more because I'm a coaster fanatic. I already loved Spy Buddies, but I love it more because I'm an action movie buff. And I'm sure that this works in the opposite direction too, though it's a little more difficult for me to think of examples since the first thing that comes to my mind is when episodes have a poor showing of my favorite characters, like Dumped, or when an episode invokes real-life issues like That's No Lady or Party Pooper Pants, which feels a little more serious than the phenomenon I've been talking about. But I'm sure this influence thing works in that direction too. It's just so fascinating to think of how so many different things come together to form one opinion on something. And no matter what, I can't just stick to the facts of an episode. And I wouldn't want to, because that's not how I organically experience things. And I think that's the thought I'm going to leave you all with as I end this video, so I will see you all in the next review.